Well, hi, good morning, and thanks for joining me here in my shop. Today is June 5th. It's been a few days since I've been in my shop because the weather has been absolutely perfect. There's just no other way to describe it, and it continues to be so. Another perfect day out there, but I decided I'll come in, I'll put a little bit of time into this radio. I had been in here a few times actually and started videos, but couldn't complete them, and honestly, the reason I couldn't complete them was because I'm a little bit pushed over the edge about what's happening in the United States. That's the truth of it. So I have a little bit of trouble coming in here and doing an entertainment sort of video while this is happening. So I'll try my best to ignore all that and have some fun with this radio for a little while. Also, this will probably be the last video I post for a few days because my wife and I are on our way to Ottawa for a few days. So I won't be doing any videos. So this will be the one. Now what am I going to do here today? I did mention I had fiddled with this a little bit in the last couple of days, and one of the things I found is the volume control and the balance control are fused together solidly. And I have not been able to separate them. And there they go. They just moved for the first time. How do you like that? Oh my gosh. Huh. There's some kind of spring loading in here. What's going on with that? Okay, let's start with this. What's happening with the volume control? That sounds like a good place to start. Now we're going to look at the panel here. So it says volume, balance. I don't see, it doesn't seem to indicate in any way which is which. Now I think typically the front knob would be the volume, and the back knob. Something else I noticed too. So this is the back knob, let's call it. I'm going to put it on. So I did spray WD-40 up in here, and then I came back sometime later, and still they were fused together solidly to the point where I started thinking they really were one control, which is kind of crazy. But what I just noticed this morning is this. This is a spring-loaded control here. Why would they do that? So you see the two of them are operating together. They feel fused. This also, if you turn it hard enough, this will spin on the shaft. This is so loose. And it is the right knob. So if I hold the outer one still and try to turn the inner one, it won't turn. If I push it in a little bit, oops, then it turns. How does that work? Balance and volume locked together. Balance, balance, balance. Balance is only significant in this radio when you have both the AM and FM receiver operating simultaneously out the two speakers. There's no balance otherwise because basically these are two mono radios with their own speakers. I don't know, I can't, nothing's coming into my head, so let's play around with the radio actually operating. Maybe we can sort it out from there. I'm busily trying to think up why this would be the way it is. Why would they do this? Just another thing, just to remind myself, I did test all the tubes. Tubes are okay, except this guy was very weak. He's a two-part tube, very weak on one side and only so-so on the other. I then tried to rejuvenate this tube, something I've never ever attempted because I don't have a lot of faith in it. And well, the radio works. The tube still looks quite weak though. Okay, where are we now? So first setting here is FM. Isn't that strange? You're listening through a single microphone, more or less. There's actually 3 microphones live here right now. One of them is a stereo one. Let me get rid of them. One mono one. So all you're listening to, let's just show you how this is working up here. The microphone is hanging right here. This is a stereo microphone. It has 2 sides to it. And that's normally what you're listening to me through. That could cause some stereo effect from the speakers. I'm going to separate these speakers further, for sure, because they're pretty close. Now, what I could have been hearing was destructive interference from a mono signal coming out of these speakers. Maybe these should be in proper phase. I don't know what's going on in this set. Okay, let's separate them out like this. No hum in here. So again, if I just turn the volume control, the balance goes with it. Only that speaker's operating. Now this one's operating. Both going. But then unless I push in this control, when I turn the volume down, the balance goes all the way to one side. What in the heck is going on here? How is this supposed to be some kind of advantage? And then, so I was wrong about each radio feeds only one speaker. So let's try the AM radio and see if it doesn't come out of both speakers. It's just that speaker now. Push in the volume, turn the tone. It's just all there. So this is not clear at all what's going on here. So what's happened now is the control I convince myself is the volume control is turned to 0. If I turn the balance, the sound will come out of the speaker as if this is the volume control. If I turn the volume, this speaker's coming on. There's a space. Okay. Balance control all the way this way. Volume control does this. If you push it in, it does the volume here. Balance control all the way the other way. Volume 0 comes out full blast.
Keeping you down till you're fighting and find another way.
Volume up. Go to this speaker.
Queer, Black, and Funny. We're going to talk to Brandon Ash Muhammad, releasing Canada's first ever queer Black
Okay, so this is tuned in to CBC.
Beyonce, she announced that
perfectly.
she'll be releasing a new visual album on
Now I'm just
July
going to try to
31st.
put the sound over there by
And it's set
messing
to
around here.
reimagine the lessons of the Lion King for today's young kings and queens in search of their own crowns. She also released a new song a couple of weeks ago. Word if it's going to be
Okay, I must have
new album.
must have made a crazy observation there at one point. So we'll just ignore what I thought I saw happening. So what is going on that this is all messed up like this? I mean, this can't be the way it's supposed to work. So I'm going to guess there's some problem in the volume tone control area where maybe a capacitor is shorted out or something like that, and the signal is getting somewhere where it shouldn't get, and the result is these controls are all kind of confused. What else could it be? Let's go on to AM. We'll go over to AM. Okay, this is the AM radio now. Clean the switch up in there for sure. AM radio. Okay, so that sound is in the middle. Push in the volume and work the balance. It's going there. It's going here quieter. But it's just going back and forth. Much louder out of there. Okay, volume to 0. Tone control over. Okay, balance is in the middle right now, but all the sound's coming out of there. Volume up. Shows up here. Balance? Does balance mean something other than balance? So I've looked for a schematic diagram for this radio. I found nothing. I couldn't find anything on it. Quite disappointing. So what is going on? How could this even be? When everything's working so great too. Maybe I should put some signals into the phono input and see what happens. Might as well just keep, if things aren't adding up, maybe I just need to collect more information and maybe it'll come clear once I get a little more. So I'm going to need an audio signal I can feed into the input here. This is looking for a ceramic cartridge, so it's looking for a fairly strong signal. So we can get away with using this guy. Now, like most of my vintage equipment has its own problems. So this guy often has no output from this switch being a little dirty here. So first we got to convince ourselves that there's an output from it. Just grabbing the old speaker here. Convince ourselves the speaker even works. We get nowhere. How come nothing? Why nothing? Uh-oh. There we are. Sine wave, please. Oh, got it. There we go. Okay, so we have a signal probably of a pretty good level for going into this guy. Turn it down a little bit. In case I'm wrong about that, and it's a lot of signal. Oh, son of a gun, this isn't gonna clip on over there, Jim. Gonna have to use a phono cord. Okay, so I'm going to put this into what is marked as the black input. For some reason, I have a black And a yellow input must be referring to the wire colors, of course. So I'm going to hook this up ground to ground. There is no hydro system grounding on this because it's plugged into an isolation transformer until I make this connection. Now there it is. Well, there may not be. This is a 2-prong piece of equipment. Okay, what do we hear? Volume up. Still hear the radio. Turn it over to phono. Volume down. Phono. There it is. Excellent. Just to convince you. Now, and to convince me. So, coming out of both speakers. So, one channel going in, sound coming out of both speakers. That's not right. Volume pushed in and down. So the volume is right down, the inner knob, still hear it. Balance control, barely out. Balance control is all the way to the right. Volume down, balance control all the way to the right. What happens if I turn the balance all the way to the right, all the way to the left? So I turn the balance all the way this way. I'm not going to get anywhere here. So if the balance were in the middle, if this were working the way I think they should work, I think we all would agree that it's very simple how these should work. Put the balance in the middle, get the sound out of both speakers, turn the volume right down, sound gone. Excuse me, that's not what's happening. So it's got to be, is it the volume control that's in trouble, or the balance control that's in trouble, or the combination? And why do they have this spring loaded? Why is it locked to the balance? One of you has the answer to all this? Why, oh, hey, why is this shaft silver, brass and silver? This got replaced? I don't think so. I think this is brass because it's a yeah, it's like that. that's how I feel about it. I was gonna go to the place where, oh, this has been replaced and it was done wrong, or this isn't the right control or something like that, but I don't think that's a place to go. Oh my gosh, I'm stuck on the volume control. Well, let's continue. I will move this now, input to the other side. So let's just review here. Balance all the way to the left, volume turned right down. Go on the other channel. Yeah. Okay. So I hold the balance this way only, and I'll turn the volume alone. Okay, so that's pretty normal. And now I will hold the volume control at 0 and turn the balance. And if I just grab the volume control to turn it, the balance goes with it. So the whole idea here is to have an AM radio and an FM radio, I believe, AM radio, FM radio, each producing a single channel for very early attempts at stereo broadcast. So you'd have a simulcast program from an FM station and probably their sister AM station, because a lot of radio stations do that. They have an AM and FM, sometimes exactly the same program on both, at least back then they did. So, and I know there were simulcasts being done, because I remember when I was a kid they were happening. I was curious about them, but we had no way of listening to them. I think the average person would grab an FM radio and a completely separate AM radio and set those up around their TV or wherever it is that this simulcast was happening in a way, and that's how they would get their stereo. In this case, they combined the AM and FM radio together into one chassis. And of course, the more modern FM stereo, through multiplexing the signal, took over all these ideas and wiped them out. So this is quite an interesting radio in a sense. It's from an era where stereo was experimented with in this way. So what would be in their heads then? Now they're picturing the designers' heads. They would picture two separate radios here, and you would either have to have two volume controls, but if you didn't want two volume controls, because you don't want to have two, it's expensive to have two, so you're going to try to combine the volume action. Try to combine the volume control action on the output of two different radios. There's no switch here that switches from AM to FM for this control. You know, okay, so some of these thoughts are half baked in my head. They're coming out of my mouth, and you may not be hearing enough to really follow along what I'm thinking. I'm sure I'm even hearing enough myself. So what would the problem be? So you got your two radios. First of all, the signal strengths are different, so you need to adjust and balance for these two radios not being the same. And then you want to turn the volume control to do this to both sides at the same time. But that just sounds like regular balance controls. Now wait a minute now. If you do balance in a stereo, you need two balance controls, one for each channel. You can't balance stereo with one control. So in this case, how can you possibly do that? How can you have a balance control? The speakers on this, and if you're not playing stereo, balance doesn't really matter because it's the same sound coming out of both speakers. And both speakers is a small console. Speakers are close together, producing the same sound. You wouldn't know if it's one or two, unless there's something different about the speakers, and there isn't, because they're identical, two identical speakers. Possibly replaced speakers. Holy smokes. I'm stuck on a volume control. So getting back to what the designers must have been facing here. So they've got two radio signals at different levels coming out of the two radios. And they want to feed that through. There's two amplifiers. Hot tubes. Those are hot tubes. So this is a double tube. It's one tube, but it has two sections inside it. So we can do left channel, right channel, without them knowing about each other. Same thing with these. I mean, this is definitely built for two separate channels. So there'll be two signals on the grids of this. Two separate signals. One from the AM radio, one from the FM radio. The volume control is controlling the level of both. How can a single volume control the level of both? How could that possibly work? Because there's actually 4 controls behind here, not 2. No, there's only 2. I'll have to look again. So you're listening to the simulcast station, and you decide, oh, that side's not loud enough. This side is coming from the AM radio. I need to turn this side up. You reach for one volume control. That's controlling one thing. Let's going to turn this side up too. So you must have some kind of balance control. or maybe in effect it's like a balance, but in fact it's another volume control. So you could have just crazy thoughts. You could have one. You cannot have one volume control. What are you doing in here? Okay, let's do this. I'm going to kind of neutralize this. I'm going to set the balance in the middle, volume down. Hard to say where the middle is. We'll say that's the middle. The volume is turned right down. And in this condition, if we're listening to AMF, you know what? We're going to flip to AMF and we're going to find out what the heck happens. That's the best way to do it. Not just yet. So this is crazy. I have no volume control over this speaker. Just the other speaker. You know. I just figured it out. Okay, so I think some of you have probably figured this out. There are two volume controls. There is a left volume and a right volume. And they are connected together mechanically with a spring lock to disconnect them. So you can make fine adjustments. And from then on, the two volume controls work together. That's all it is. So what has thrown me off is the fact that it says volume dot balance. And I'm thinking volume dot balance. But really, it's a combo situation here. It's really two volume controls. You really should have had that as left volume, right volume. But you know, that wouldn't make sense to people, I guess, who are, because they lock these together. If they didn't lock these to try to make them track together, then you could have a left volume, right volume, or FM volume, AM volume. Boy, that would be a lot simpler. Okay, I sorted it out. That's just me. Yeah, okay, this is one of the reasons why I'm going to be out of the shop for a few days. I need to rebuild my capacity. So I got it now. So I put both to the right. I got it. And we turn them both up together because they're locked. And we get both speakers going almost simultaneously. So if they're almost the same, if they're not the same, of course I only have one channel going in. Okay, hold it. Back up the whole cart. I have this in one channel. We should only hear it out of one channel at any time. You have two volume controls, a left and a right. Do I hear it out of here? Because I certainly hear it out of here right now. I just move that volume over far enough. Move the right volume or balance control. You know, this is really, and I'm sure it is, a stereo machine for the record player. Then it should be one channel or the other. You should never have both coming out with one input. Let me flip this back over the other way. Back on the other channel. Here. Okay, now, I think it's in this channel. So if I avoid turning this up, we'll hear nothing. We should hear nothing. So we can hear it. So this is telling me that the stereo-ness in here is being depleted by some kind of leak of the signal between channels. Because it doesn't matter which channel I put it in, I can hear it out of the other speaker. Let's make sure we can hear it out of this one. Oh yeah. It seems weaker in the wrong speaker. Weaker in the wrong speaker, but still there. So now it's more like something. Well, what could do that? I mean, a capacitor could do that. Where would it have to be in the circuit to do this? So there must be two radio outputs in here, an FM and an AM. Two audio outputs. Oh, let's put this into AM/FM and find out what happens before we. So it's phono AM radio, and now AM FM. So I clearly hear the FM here and the AM here, clearly. About the same volume level too. Now this is a, I have to turn this off. This one is a copyrighted song. I don't know if they could, if YouTube can pick it up through all this hash, probably. Okay, so we have the right effect. We have AM and FM. Now, turn the radio down. Silence. Both channels got turned down because both knobs turned. Turn up just the AM side. Never appears here. Okay, turn up the, did I say AM side? Turn up the FM side. Only appears here. That's exactly what you would want. Now why doesn't the phono work as well? The phono, if this can produce separated two-channel sound, it appears to do it just fine. Why not in phono mode? And then the rest of it in FM mode only or AM mode only, perhaps they have some way of getting both speakers going. And maybe that's why I've got a little bit confused about this whole thing. Maybe they do. So this is adjusted correctly in a sense right now. This is working. No, it isn't. Now it is. Both channels coming up simultaneously. Go back to FM, leave this just like this, because maybe I just was so messed up over there. Okay, now we're on phono. Where'd our sound go? What happened to that nice tone I had? Did it go away? What happened to it? I guess put it in the other channel. Oh. I'm getting the impression. Yeah, something's happened in here. I got a bad phono cord. And before you say, oh, you need to do some maintenance on your box here, I've done it. I've done it. I've done it more than once. Okay, we're in business again. Watch out, volume's down. Good, we hear it. This speaker only. So we're in phono. I am now using the volume control. This arrangement has two volume controls, and they're both kind of zeroed the same way. So that's coming out of there. It might be a little bit coming out of there, but the vast majority is over here. Okay, leave it as such and flip it. Coming out of here. Some coming out of here. So I think what we're finding out is there's some kind of leak of sound between the two channels when you're dealing with the FM. I'm sorry, dealing with the phono. How important is that? You know, when things get quiet enough, we can't hear them. So even if they exist, who cares? And if things get quiet enough while there's other sounds around, we can't hear them. So again, who cares? So if a little bit of the channel is leaking across, but it's so low compared to the regular program sound, we would never hear it, and who would care? But it does indicate something's not working right, because I'm sure that's not the intention, because it's a simple thing to keep these things split 100%. Okay, so I've deduced something's gone wrong and needs to be fixed in terms of all this. And no schematic, it's just about impossible to sort through something like that. Well, I'm just trying to think of what obvious things could cause a problem like that, and I don't think there's anything obvious to me. Power off. Let's take a look underneath, because I don't know what to do, so I'm going to do something. Gotta get underneath this guy now. I thought I had him standing right up here. Hold on to it here. Okay, so the control we've been looking at is this guy. It's just two controls. And now I understand it's a left channel and a right channel volume. That if you're turning the volume up on an unused channel, what would it matter? It's not being used, so there shouldn't be anything there anyway. But in fact, there is something there. So, how can a signal leak around? So this is the output, and these are the two outputs, and you know they're going straight to the 12AX7. So if the signals are separate completely at this point, then the problem has to be further on. If the signals are already mixed a bit here, then the problem's back this way. I could listen to these signals and see what's there, or scope them, or do something like that. So here's the two grid connections. You can see a resistor, small resistor buried under there. I'm looking for anything that connects the two grids together in some way, like a big resistor or anything. There's a small resistor, goes to ground. There's a ground terminals right in here. So that's on the grid. That's probably the grid leak resistor, or the resistor intended to remove any charge that's building up on the grid accidentally. A problem in the tube itself? Could the tube itself be why is it? Did I do a 12AX7? I think I did. I must have done it. So this has an output side, which then goes to the two output tubes. Here they are here. You can almost bet that the signal's being conveyed through these two capacitors. It's interesting that these bright yellow capacitors appear only around these circuits. You didn't use them anywhere else. Makes me think they've been replaced, but I don't believe so. There's lots of this tubing on what looks like original parts. So in that case, I'm thinking about a mistake has been made. So when we get to here, these grids, how can they have how can they be getting a signal between them? So the grid has only these going to it and two resistors here. and this one here. So going back to the grounded terminal. So those are also the grid leak, grid decharging resistors. They go to the ground. So I don't really see how the signal can kind of leak across here between channels. That would mean the signal is somehow leaking when it gets right to the volume control. It's present on both volume control inputs. So what's present on the inputs? So there's a black wire here, and I see of the 3 potentiometer terminals, the leftmost one, this one back here, they're tied together, and to this black wire, which goes to this brown wire, which goes to the 120 volts. So this is B minus, this is the negative, or the ground if you want to call it that. So this other side has to be the input side. Hey, what's this wire going here? So from the input side we have 2 signals coming out of this switch, which I need to clean. But on the back here there is another tab coming out, and it goes, it's the but this is the tone, this is the bass, this is the treble, and look, there's 2 controls for the 2 channels. So, you know, these could be on the input to the 12AX7, they could be on the output from the 12AX7, they could be all over the place, but they're not down here, they're hooked up to the back of the volume control. So this leads to 2 capacitors, and then a connection to this tab on the back. Tab is really what I guess I should call it, a tab. And then coming off are 2 resistors heading to the input side of the tone control here. And what about the other tone control? The other tone control. Now this is a little bit interesting. So here's 2 capacitors here feeding this tone control. One of them has a slip-on wire covering like this here, if you can see that in the camera, or like this piece. That's classic for this vintage of equipment. There's quite a bit of it around. There's bits here, this brownish stuff. But the fact is, this is fairly modern. This kind of material here is kind of modern. So now we're back to somebody did something in here. Somebody put these yellow ones in. Why in heaven's name would they put this here? Why would they change the... If these went in and this line covering went in at the same time, I see another piece of it down here. So going back to this one then, we have these 2 capacitors doing the same job, coming from the same tube. One of them has the white plastic on it, and the other one has the old stuff on it. But they're the same kind of capacitor. Well, is this the day in the factory? This was the day when they switched from this old material to the modern stuff. Right on this day. Halfway through building this, they switched. Well, even though this is all curious to look at and think about, the radio is actually working fairly well if you know what you're doing. Now that I know how to work the volume control, it's actually working quite well. So do I really need to understand this in some kind of detail and figure all this stuff out? There's some other things I need to do in this radio before deciding that that's it. And there's quite a few things I need to do yet. One of them is check the bias on these tubes, on the output tubes. Now they're probably biased. Can I not put this down somehow? No, there's all kinds of stuff that's going to get damaged up there. Oh boy. I know how I did it. I did it with my this guy. See. Anybody know why I just turned this over? I kind of forgot why I even did it. Because I said there was a couple other things. Oh yeah, we wanted to check the bias. Check the bias. Okay. Okay. Power on. I can know the radio's drawing power because the dim bulb has come on. Volume down. What happened here? So the phono was making quite a bit of noise before, but it's not making much noise now. With no input. Can't anything stay the same? Okay, AM. AM, FM. Don't worry about that. Everything's working. What is the bias on the two output tubes? That's the question. So those output tubes were, I've forgotten what they are. They are 25 EH5s. 25 EH5s. I may not be in my book here. 25, I don't think that's going to be in here. 25, maybe 25C, 25L. So 25 EH5 is not in here. Tube's too new. Too new. So, well, we can tell because we can see from the circuitry which is which. Because we know the signal's coming out of this 12AX7 on these two. So there'll be a bias between here and the cathode. And there should be a bias, a cathode resistor. It's usually of a little bit of higher wattage. And there should also be a bypass capacitor. So here we see what could represent a bypass capacitor. One leg appears to be connected to, I'm going to guess, B minus. The other is going to a pin here with a fairly large resistor on it, right in here. 330 ohms. So that's got to be the cathode resistor. Now, shouldn't there be two of them? So I see a yellow wire connecting the cathode here over to here. So we have a large cathode looking resistor and a bypass looking capacitor. This has to be the cathode here. And somehow they're able to use a common cathode resistor. That doesn't quite make sense to me, but maybe if you're bypassing it, then that's fine. So, what if you're failing to bypass it properly and they're sharing the cathode resistor? Hey ya. That might be it. This cathode bypass capacitor may not be bypassing well enough. Okay, let's do what we're going to do. We're going to measure the voltage dropping on that cathode resistor. Do it with this guy. Oh, you know what? I can't do it. So one side of that cathode resistor should be going to B minus. And I'm looking to see if I can prove that to myself. I can't. Yes, I can. Yes, I can see the B minus there. Good. That means I can use this meter without too much concern about blowing myself up. Now, I'm still feeding a signal in, am I not? This. No, I am not. So I disconnected this guy, so I don't have to worry. This is the only ground, and it's on the well, I'm pretty sure it's B minus anyway. Let me just get a good spot here for B minus. Here's a really good one right here. Okay, and the meter probe. If I do that, make it easy to see that. Meter, a little bit, kinda. So it's a little fuzzy, but you can kind of see the meter. I'm on the 15 volt scale. And we'll go right on the cathode here. Oh, this should be positive, I'm pretty sure. Here we go. Tiny reading there. Very tiny. 5 volts scale. So on the 5 volt scale, we got 1 volt. 1 volt of bias. That just doesn't sound right, does it? 1 volt of bias. You would think the output from this would be terribly distorted if there's no bias on the grids. And if you feed it a signal greater than 1 volt, it's going to drive the grid positive and get cut off and all kinds of distortion. So how can that be? How can this be? Because I'm wrong about the resistors. No, it's definitely not wrong. The resistor's connection to B minus. Yeah. So could it just a weak bypass capacitor cause that too? The capacitor leaking so much that it can't leak that much. Let's check it again. Five volt scale, 1 volt. 25 EH5. No schematic. Well, I'm going to find out what it's supposed to be. Let me check here. Okay, here's a data sheet for the EH5 tube. This one I'm talking about is a 25 EH5. And I'll just come down here, maximum ratings, plate voltage, maximum rating, design center values, 135 volts. So the 25 EH5 is really intended to go into this kind of radio that's got no significant B+. Plate voltage 110. Cathode resistor 62. And what did I say it was in this one? This one it's orange, black. That'd be 33. 33 ohms. Half that. But you know what? It's for 2 tubes. So that's why it's 33 ohms. Because it's for 2 tubes. So it has the correct. Now that zero signal plate current's almost 50 milliamps. So what do you get if you stick 50 milliamps through 50 ohms? 50 milliamps through 50 ohms. So 50 times 50, 2500, 2.5 volts. I'm measuring 1. Nowhere is it going to give an actual voltage here. 3 volts. It does. Peak AF grid 3 volts. Peak AF grid number 1 voltage 3 volts. Signal peak AF. So what they're saying here, I believe, is put a 62 ohm resistor in, get a bias sufficient to handle a peak voltage of 3 volts. So that means the grid voltage has to be more than 3 volts. I'm at 1 volt. The other problem here is if the bias goes low, it's less and less negative, this current here, the zero plate current, will start going up and up. And you'll have too much current. Zero signal grid number 2 current. So that's a screen current. So is this really a serious enough problem for me to do anything about it? Conceivably, this current has gone up into tubes, and they are overheating or working unnecessarily hard. And at the same time, at high volumes, you should hear distortion from overdriving the grid with a signal greater than 3 volts. It's greater than the bias on the tube. Well, I know I can put my scope on this and see all this stuff too. That's a very good idea. Let's scope this thing. Okay, I'll turn on our scope. Just pick any old sweep. Put this on the same ground as the other. So I think what's happened there, and this shouldn't have happened, is I, for the first time, put a real hydro system ground onto this radio chassis, if you like, or radio B minus. And this has caused the AM radio to start working better, because it has a better thing to feed to on the antenna circuit. Is there any truth in what I just said? I'm not even sure. But I'm going to go with it on the basis that ignore it. That happened. Okay, so we want to look at first the grid circuits, the grid signal. This might make noise in the speaker. Nope. Made my scope jump. Okay, we'll go on this one here. I saw the scope jumping. So that's got to be the noise we're hearing on the AM radio. I don't have the... So that's okay, isn't it? I don't know. Turn the volume down, turn the volume up. Flip the radio to... That's phono. AM. AM and FM. FM.
To the point where it did happen once the oil revenues and the mining revenues started to come in.
It seemed as though so many governments, provincial, state, national, federal, run deficits and spend more than they have, and they borrow and they borrow. Particularly now, given this COVID situation, does it really matter anymore?
Yes, it does. There's nothing wrong with running a deficit and borrowing money when the circumstances really warrant it. In some years, it's necessary to do it for a COVID-19 purpose, for a particular educational health program or whatever, then do it. There's nothing inherently wrong with it, but don't do it as a matter of course.
Obviously, a person who was in your situation, there were a number of policy levers, whether it was considering selling utilities or raising taxes or trying to target various incentives. But if we look at the situation now, bring it back to where we are right now, we started this off talking about Peckford saying he wasn't ruthless enough. Do you think you're ruthless? And does it take ruthlessness to actually wrestle something like this?
No, I don't think it takes ruthlessness. It takes discipline, and it takes perhaps a little determination.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the volume up quite high and see if any of this flattens out. Here we go.
You've got to be prepared to do that. I don't think that's being ruthless.
Whether it's the current Liberal government or the previous Conservative government, it seems that successive governments of the last 15, 20 years in this province have had a difficulty getting control on spending. As you know, we're soon going to get a new premier in this province. Premier Ball will be stepping down next month. If the new premier were to say, look, Clyde,
Well, I can't argue there's anything wrong here at all, because the sound is fine. The image on the scope, there's no sign that the tube is being driven out of its grid bias range, if you like. I don't think there's anything more for me to do with this radio, frankly. Verify its alignment and stuff like that. I don't think there's much more I can do, and frankly, I don't want to do too much more. With it working like this, considering the future of this radio. The future of this radio is it's going into a store in Toronto and it will be sold. If I fiddle around with it too much, that sales price is going to go up and up and up because I'm going to charge more money for the work I'm doing here. At this point, there's almost no, I'm charging almost nothing for this. And that's what they want to hear. They want to hear that they didn't spend any money to get the thing going so they can sell it in their store. So what's happening is they're buying this stuff, based on what it looks like, and then giving it to me to see if I can bring it up and make it saleable and worth having. Well, I think this is well worth having, even like this. And the main thing is I got the record player going. Okay, that's the decision. After all this work, I will simply put this thing back together, back into its cabinet, and it's done. Great. Okay.